A lot more that the British government could do to help them. She is Mrs. Pat Plamer, whose husband Robin has been imprisoned in Libya for over 3 months now. What exactly do you want the government to do now?
Well, I want first of all to forget the swap, which the newspapers are talking about, which has always been talked about since this first happened. The Libyans have never actually asked for the Libyans held in this country on bombing charges to be swapped for the hostages in Tripoli. And I would like to make that clear, first of all. That's all I read about at the newspapers, and I find it very annoying. I think initially there were hints that this is what was required, but now Gaddafi is saying that he would like the relations between Britain and Libya to be eased. He hasn't specified exactly how, but he would like a positive gesture from the British government to Libya.
But how can Britain do a deal with a man who has deployed hit squads in London, who's put London through a siege, and who some say is directly responsible for the death of a policewoman here? I mean, how does the British government do a deal with a man like that?
It's difficult, I appreciate it, and I understand how the British public feel towards Gaddafi, and particularly after the shooting of this policewoman, and also the shooting of this Libyan a couple of weeks ago. Nevertheless, we mustn't lose sight of the fact that 4 British men are being held in Libya. They are innocent men, they are victims of what's happened, and I'm interested in getting my husband out as the other wives, mothers and sisters are in getting the remaining.
Your husband was taken in retaliation for what Britain did after the siege, is that right?
I believe my husband was taken as a hostage to the Libyans that are held on bombing charges, which occurred before the St James's siege in April.
And he must have known, he's a British telecom engineer, is he not? Yes, tell me a little bit more about your husband. He went to Tripoli how many months ago?
He had been in Tripoli for just over a year when he was picked up. He went out last April, 1983.
And he worked quite happily, quite freely there?
Yes.
And then one day, the Libyan authorities came along and just arrested him without any warning at all?
Well, he had a little bit of warning, in as much as he was picked up on the 10th of May, I think it was, and questioned by the police for having done a 3-point turn on the university driveway. He drove in there by mistake. He was going to a different site, but I've never actually been to the university, but as I understand it, it's not clearly labelled. You wouldn't know it was a university from any other building. He did a 3-point turn, and a military vehicle pulled in behind him, and he was taken off for questioning for several hours. Then he was returned home to his villa, and then on the Monday afternoon, the 14th, he was picked up from work.
Any other charge levelled against him?
No.
None at all?
I don't think even that charge was levelled at him. It was a driving offence. That's just been an assumption, I think.
Have you had any contact at all with him?
I visited him 5 weeks ago, approximately, and went out to Libya to see if it was possible to see him, and I did, which was a great surprise, really. I saw him for an hour, or just over. The Libyans were very courteous and very pleasant, and my husband's obviously been very well looked after. He was very surprised to see me. Obviously, he didn't know I was in Tripoli.
The conditions are very good, you say?
Yeah, they're being looked after.
I know you're in a terrible position, you're in a terrible predicament, because your husband is there, kept by the Libyans, and you have to put out as many feelers as you can, but don't you feel an awful resentment towards the Libyan government? Don't you blame Gaddafi directly for what's happened there?
No, perhaps I don't know whether I should, but I don't. I don't feel any animosity whatsoever towards the Libyans. My husband enjoyed working out there. I enjoyed living out there. My anger at the moment is directed at the British government, to Mrs Thatcher, who I feel could do something to ease the situation. Gaddafi wants a gesture. There are 4 people being held out there, and we want them back.
But they did it in the first place, didn't they? They took these people. They took your husband and kept him there,
yes,
without any reason whatsoever.
Yes.
They were the ones who deployed the hit squads and went through the siege in London. And it's them who should surely be to blame, not Mrs Thatcher and the government here.
Right, but nevertheless the ball's in Mrs Thatcher's court. The Libya, as they have seen it, have made a gesture. They have made a goodwill gesture by releasing 2 of the Britons held. I believe they would like to release the remaining 4, but if they could just get something positive from Mrs Thatcher, even if she just talked to them, or possibly sent a junior minister to Tripoli, to try and negotiate for the release of the remaining 4 Britons.
That's all you wanted to do?
That's all I wanted to do.
Pat Plamer, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.